Aita, drama, secrets, confessions. Welcome to Trove Reddit.
There was a single word that could make my mother fall silent instantly. Just one word. Not sorry. Not begging. But a strange code word that made the entire house go dead quiet. And the most terrifying part was, my mother knew we were using it against her, yet she couldn't do anything about it. Sounds like a horror movie, right? But that was my real childhood. A family that looked perfect on the outside, but was rotten on the inside. We lived like prisoners, and only this secret allowed us to breathe. Until one day, we accidentally used that word in front of our relatives. And everything collapsed. You won't believe what happened after that. If you want to hear the full truth, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Everyone thought my family was the perfect example. We had a big house, family dinners where everyone was present, and smiles that never seemed to be missing from the photos. But would you believe me if I said it was all just a cheap mask? In reality, my mother was like a ticking time bomb. One spoon placed in the wrong spot and she could explode. A single glass falling was enough to make the whole family tremble. Have you ever lived in a house where your mother's footsteps were scarier than thunder outside? My father was different. He chose silence. But that silence was just as terrifying. It was a constant reminder that no matter what happened, no one was going to protect you. What do you think is worse, someone who's always yelling, or someone who pretends not to hear you cry? As for us, the children, we only had each other. We shared secret glances, small nods, as if we were allies in a war nobody else could ever understand. Can you believe we even created unspoken rules just to survive inside our own home? On the outside, everyone called my mother a strong, capable woman. But in our eyes, she was more like a monster that could devour an entire childhood. And from that very desperation, we invented the strangest weapon you've ever heard of. Do you want to know how that weapon ended up changing my entire family? The older I got, the more I realized that house was no longer a home. It felt like a giant cage. Every word, every action from my mother was like a knife cutting straight into our hearts. Do you know what it feels like to get yelled at? For breathing too loudly. Yes, that actually happened in my family. My mother could get angry just because I frowned or stared out the window for too long. Honestly, her eyes were like lasers, one glance, and everyone fell silent. Have you ever lived in a constant fear that a storm could strike at any moment without warning? My father stayed silent. Sometimes, worse, he'd nod as if agreeing with my mother. That silence made me feel completely alone. What do you think is worse, someone constantly yelling, or someone who watches you get crushed without lifting a finger? We, the kids, developed strange reflexes. Just hearing the scrape of my mother's shoes down the hallway made us shrink back instinctively. As if we were tiny soldiers trying to survive an invisible battlefield. Can you imagine a child who's supposed to be learning and playing, instead having to dodge their own mother every single second? The pressure built up day by day, hour by hour. And when the tension finally reached its peak, we accidentally discovered a secret that could turn everything upside down. Can you guess what that secret was? Everything started on an evening that seemed completely normal. My mother blew up again, just because I dropped a spoon on the floor. It was a tiny clang of metal, but her reaction was like a bomb exploding in the room. Have you ever seen someone scream until their face turns bright red, veins popping, just over a meaningless mistake? I was trembling, not knowing what to do to survive it. In desperation, I muttered a nonsense word. Pineapple. Sounds ridiculous, right? But then something strange happened. My mother froze. Just a few seconds, but to me, it felt like a lifetime. Her eyes darkened, her mouth opened, but no words came out. Can you imagine a woman who has been screaming for hours suddenly falling completely silent because of a single strange word? I looked at my siblings. We couldn't believe what had just happened. And then, like an unspoken agreement, we started testing it again. Every time a storm erupted, someone would whisper pineapple. And the room would fall into silence. Do you think it was magic, or just a cruel joke of fate? At first, we laughed because it was funny. But then, we realized we had just created a weapon. A secret that, if used at the right moment, could control the monster in our house. Have you ever dreamed of saying just one word that could stop all your fears? But be careful. Every secret comes with a price. From that day on, pineapple became our secret charm. At first, it was just a joke to comfort each other, but then it turned into a weapon no one expected. Whenever my mother started screaming, one of us would quietly say, pineapple. And she stop. Unbelievable, right? A woman who could curse for hours suddenly went completely silent because of a meaningless word. Can you believe a single simple word could shake an entire house? Every time it worked, we would look at each other, our eyes shining with fear and exhilaration. As if, for the first time, we held a bit of power in our hands. Have you ever felt so powerless that you had to cling to a joke just to survive? But the more we used it, the more addicted we became. Sometimes, just seeing my mother frown, someone would rush to whisper the forbidden word. And strangely enough, it still worked. She hated it, but she was powerless. Why do you think someone so domineering couldn't fight back? That code word became our signal of unity. Not just a way to stop our mother, but an invisible thread binding us kids together. We shared a secret, a weapon, and the belief that we weren't alone. Have you ever had a secret that, just by mentioning it, everyone in your group instantly understood? But, like a double-edged sword, the more we used it, the closer we pushed our mother to her limits. And you know what happens when a monster is cornered? It strikes back. If you're feeling the tension rising in this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. At first, we thought we had won. But the truth was the opposite. Day by day, my mother became even more terrifying. She knew we were using the code word to stop her, but that only made her angrier. Instead of freezing in surprise, she started swallowing her rage, her face stiff, her eyes blazing red, as if she wanted to burn each of us alive. Have you ever seen someone who can't explode immediately, but you know their anger is building, ready to erupt 100 times stronger? My father remained silent. He never intervened, even avoiding our eyes as if he were ashamed. But that silence only made my mother feel more humiliated. She began looking for every possible way to regain control. Some days, she stopped yelling and chose psychological torment instead. Silent meals that felt suffocating. Sarcastic remarks as sharp as knives. Even a single glance from her could make the whole table tremble. Have you ever sat through a meal where the clink of a spoon against a bowl was scarier than a bomb? We thought pineapple was our shield. But it turned out it was only kindling. Every time we used it, the distance between us and the family grew wider. It was no longer just temporary arguments, but a cold war, a wall of silence dividing us. And then, what was bound to happen, happened. One day, pineapple wasn't just whispered inside our house. It echoed during a full family gathering. Can you guess the horrifying thing that happens when a secret is exposed in front of your entire extended family? That day, my family had a big party. Relatives, friends, everyone was there. The house buzzed with laughter, the smell of food, and on the surface, we looked like the perfect family. But I knew that just a tiny spark could set everything ablaze. And just as I feared, that spark arrived. A relative accidentally complimented me in front of everyone. My mother forced a smile, but her eyes were like knives. A few minutes later, she started looking for a reason. A tiny mistake, me holding my fork and knife the wrong way. And the storm erupted right in the middle of the dinner table. Everyone fell silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. I was trembling, and in desperation, I blurted out, "Pineapple." The whole room went dead quiet. Can you imagine dozens of eyes staring at you, while your mother froze like stone in the middle of the table? Relatives were confused, not understanding what had just happened. A few chuckled, thinking it was a joke. But I saw my mother's face flush red, her lips trembling with anger at being humiliated in front of the entire family. Do you think there's anything worse than your secret being exposed publicly? That night, after the guests had left, I knew my family had crossed a threshold that could never be undone. And the real nightmare was only just beginning. The door had just closed after the last guest left, and the house instantly turned into a battlefield. No more forced smiles, no more fake glances. Only the storm of rage waiting to erupt. My mother stood in the living room, silent for a long moment. That silence was scarier than any scream. Her eyes drilled into us, each second feeling like 1,000 needles piercing our skin. Have you ever felt someone's gaze could literally crush your breath? Then, suddenly, she roared. Not an ordinary yell, but a growl like a wild animal provoked. She slammed a glass onto the floor, shards flying everywhere. How dare you humiliate me in front of the family? We froze. I wanted to run, but my legs felt nailed to the floor. She lunged toward me, pointing a trembling finger, her voice shaking with anger. You ruined everything. My father stepped forward, but instead of stopping her, he said coldly, "Is that enough chaos for one night?" His words were like pouring gasoline on the fire. My mother turned to him, her rage re-erected, and a heated argument erupted so violently that I was sure the neighbors could hear it. What do you think is scarier when family secrets not only crumble, but become weapons used to destroy each other? That night, I realized that pineapple was no longer a charm. It had turned into the cause of a never-ending nightmare. After that fateful party, my house was never the same again. No more forced laughter. No more family dinners with everyone present. Only a thick silence, so heavy it felt like you could cut it into pieces. I realized that pineapple was never a savior. It was just a temporary bandage over an infected wound. Every time we used it, that wound spread wider, ran deeper, and rotted faster. Have you ever thought you found a way out, only to realize it was just a trap leading you off a cliff? I used to believe a meaningless code word could protect us. But in the end, it only made us face a painful truth. We had no power at all. The only power was in the hands of the one who spread fear. Have you ever had that awakening moment, realizing you were never really in control of your own life? And in that moment, I learned one thing. Fear cannot be silenced with a joke. Pain cannot disappear through silence. If you don't confront it, it will consume you from the inside out. I'm not telling this story to complain. I'm telling it to remind you that every family has darkness outsiders will never see. And sometimes, the very secrets we think of as weapons are actually the chains that bind us for life. You think if it were you, would you keep using that code word, or would you stand up and break everything? If you want to know the true ending of this story, make sure to subscribe right now because the final part will shock you more than anything you've heard so far. In the end, I realized that code word never truly freed us. It was just a small crack, and through that crack, the horrifying truth about my family was exposed. Today, I've left that house. But every time I hear someone mention pineapple, my heart still tightens. What was once a shield has now become a scar, reminding me that my childhood will never be whole. Have you ever carried a painful memory so heavy that just one word could drag you back into an old nightmare? I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it so you understand that sometimes, the weapons we use to fight fear only make it stronger. We have to face it, speak up, break the chains. Otherwise, we'll remain trapped in the cycle of fear and silence. So, I want to ask you, if you had a code word that could make anyone in your family fall silent instantly, would you use it? Or would you choose to confront them directly, no matter how high the cost? Leave a comment, because I want to hear your stories and thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and especially subscribe, so you don't miss more truly chilling and unbelievable stories. Because believe me, this story is only just the beginning.